It's no secret that employers and companies hate Gen Z. 70% of employers have said Gen Z is the hardest generation to work with. And as a result, they're firing Gen Z workers at record levels. 60% of companies reported firing a Gen Z worker this year. And if you thought this was bad, 40% of them are reluctant to hire a Gen Z employee in the first place. Not only is it harder to get a job, but even if you do get one, you could easily be fired quick, fast, and in a hurry. They blame Gen Z for having too high expectations after college, for being quote-unquote entitled. And my favorite one, lacking communication and workplace etiquette. The reason this is my favorite is because it's so ironic that the rude asshole bosses who regularly scream at and verbally abuse employees somehow have the gall to complain about etiquette and communication issues. So who's at fault here? And what should you do about it if you're a young Zoomer watching this? This is an article from Time magazine calling young people lazy, entitled narcissists, who don't want to work and just live with their parents. Just by looking at the headline, you might think this was a recent article about Gen Z, but here's the plot twist. This was actually a 2013 article written about millennials. In this article, they pretty much say the exact same things they say about Gen Z today, and it doesn't stop there. Here's another article headline from the Washington Post. The Boring 20s. Grow up, crybabies. You're America's luckiest generation. And a quote, the paradox is that one hand, members of this generation don't want to be ruled by a company. They want to have a life. This all sounds extremely familiar, doesn't it? Believe it or not, they weren't written about Gen Z. They weren't even written about millennials. The last two headlines and quotes were from articles written in 1993 and 1997, respectively, about Gen X. And you can bet your house that in 10 years, these delusional corporate asshats are going to say the exact same thing about Gen Alpha. When I was about 6 years old, I learned an incredibly valuable life lesson from my boomer mother. Being a typical immature child, I couldn't make any friends and would constantly blame the other kids for this. My mom told me that if you can't get along with one other kid, it may very well be their fault. If you can't get along with two, chances are it's your fault, but it's still possible it might be theirs. But if you can't, along with three other kids, well, it's time you look yourself in the mirror and admit the problem is you. And given these delusional corporate boomer asshats have now said this about all three generations that have come after them, it's safe to say that these headlines are all a massive projection, and that it's time for them to look in the mirror and admit the problem is them. They're the generation that's too lazy and entitled. They're too lazy to improve wages and working conditions. They're entitled for thinking they deserve cheap youth labor, despite how expensive things have gotten. They left us a huge mess and blame younger generations for not cleaning it up. I mean, even a 5-year-old child knows to pick up after himself. They're the ones who are lacking workplace etiquette and communication skills. How many times have you seen an asshat manager chew out and verbally abuse an employee while screaming at the top of his lungs like a petulant child who didn't get what he wanted for Christmas? If this is your definition of workplace etiquette and communication skills, then it's no wonder the whole boomer generation is so fucked in the head. So, with that all being said, the question remains, what should we do about it as young people today? The simple answer at this point is to just try and find a way to survive outside of work. Most Gen Z already doesn't want to work. They either want to be influencers, or move abroad, or find alternative ways to survive, outside of having to work. In the past, this was seen as cope, as it's not many people who make it that way. At this point, though, I think going the traditional route of trying to secure a traditional 9 to 5 is even more cope. It's not only impossible to find a job, even if you do find one, it's a decent chance you'll immediately get fired for not putting up with toxic abuse and having basic standards of self-respect. Unless you're top 1% student from Harvard, or you have a rich dad, trying to get a normal job is just total cope at this point. So you really have two choices if you're a young person today. Option one, you can continue trying to play this impossible traditional game where even if you're one of the lucky few who gets a job and keeps it, the jobs are not going to pay you jack shit anyways. Or option two, you can look for alternative ways to survive without work, which by the way are a lot more possible now than ever before. I personally think option 2 is the better option for the overwhelming majority of young people today. Statistically speaking, it's not a great chance that either one will be successful, but at least you'll find some level of happiness and fulfillment if you beat the odds and succeed at option 2. With option 1 of going the traditional route, even if you do succeed, your reward is $7 an hour, dog shit wages, and pretending to be grateful to your asshole boss for it. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. Now, here's the good news if you are Gen Z. Unlike for millennials and Gen X, it's a lot easier these days to check out of society, not have to work, and escape the toxic 9-to-5 corporate hellscape for good. From moving abroad to living in a van to extreme survivalism, I've thoroughly researched all the ways young people are checking out of society and living without having work. And I've put them all together in one comprehensive tier video for you right here. I'll see you there.